All right, everybody. I guess to start off part 2 of the JBL 250 Ti clones, we are at the shop. I actually work and film as a props builder, so I have access to this wonderful shop, and I'll be doing some wood filling on the cabinet. All right, so I got the majority of the marks filled. There was one big scratch on this one. There's some marks on the top. Remember, I'm painting this black, so I'm not too worried. And while all this dries, I'll be cutting out 2 large pieces of wood, and those will go here. And the real JBL 250 Ti's kind of have this like curved round bulge where the tweeter sits in. So I'm going to kind of replicate that. Yeah, so these will go like that. I'll obviously sand and make those look good. Now, I'm just gonna use some sandpaper around these edges, clean it up. All right, so we started off like that, and now it's nice and rounded. So put it on here like that. We'll obviously have a hole cut out for the driver, mount it to here, and then I'll actually probably wood fill, obviously seal with a gasket behind there. And yeah, that'll be our plate for the tweeters. All right, so we got the speaker cabinets wood filled, and we got the 2 tweeter plates cut. Gonna call it a day for today, let the filler dry, and come back next time to sand. And then we'll see if I can fit the mid-range in the existing hole. If not, we'll have to make plates for the mid-ranges. All right, so the wood filler's dry. Just gonna go ahead and start sanding this guy down. Not sure how well you guys can hear me all over the shop noise here, but just finished sanding all the wood filler down, and I've just done another coat with this stuff called a fine putty. It's really good for filling in little tiny air bubbles and stuff like what wood filler leaves behind. Takes about half hour to dry. I only did it on like the significant scratches. And then after that, I'm gonna jump on making the tweeter base plate. All right, just got this marked up and just double-sided taped it on there for now. And I'm gonna screw it on. All right, so I got the plates on, got the screws countersunk, wood filled, sealed all around there. And now I gotta sculpt the arch look that the 250 Ti's have, and I'll be using this stuff. Sculpt wood putty. It's a epoxy putty, 2-part. All right, guys, and that is both the tweeter plates sculpted. Obviously, this is just the rough sculpt. Once that cures, I got to go in and sand it nice and flush. But if you're ever using epoxy putty of any sort, what really helps is spraying it with some 99 isopropyl alcohol, and you wear your glove and you can smooth it out so you get a nice smooth finish, and that really helps the finishing process in the end. It'll cut down on your sanding time. All right, we are back at the shop the next day, and the epoxy putty has cured. So I'm going to sand that nice and flush, but before I do that, we're going to test fit some drivers here. So I've already test fit the JBL mid-range. I took this out of my personal pair of L7s just for a test fit. And it pretty much fits perfectly in there. We need the hole just a little bit bigger. There's no space on the bottom, but we can cut the top out just a little bit more. So we're gonna have to bore that hole out just a bit bigger because the frame is just slightly tapping. Honestly, a few millimeters and we're good. As for the tweeter, also pulled out my pair of JBL L7s. We're going to trace the frame size and get the hole bored for the magnet. All right, so got the hole saw bits here. I think we found the perfect size that we can fit the magnet and the binding posts without any rubbing. So we're gonna bore out through the center here so this tweeter will fit into our mounting plate. As you can tell, one hole's a little smaller than the other, so I made a little mistake. This one's just a bit too big. The two screw mounts for the driver are kind of like half on, half off. So what I'll do is I'll just put a piece, 2 pieces of wood there and leave the notch out for the binding post because I made it big enough for the binding post to fit, not realizing that the 2 screw holes are now kind of floating half on, half off. No big deal. I can clean that up pretty easy. So this hole, big enough for the magnet, but not the binding post, so I'll go in with a little Japanese pull saw and cut a notch out for the binding posts. And then we'll start sanding the epoxy. That's why we always measure twice, cut once, I guess. But what I'll do is I'll just put these in here. And those will act as little mounting brackets. So wood glue and put a little nail on each side. That should hold the driver in just fine. All right, so just finished doing the first pass of sanding on this guy. It's looking pretty smooth. I know on camera it probably looks like shit. You got 3 different tones here. You got dark wood, the light wood, and then the filler. So kind of looks like ass. But once I get into paint, get a coat of primer on everything, it'll look more homogenized and I'll be able to see any spots that I have to touch up. Okay, so I got both of these smoothed out. It's not perfect. And you can see how I dealt with the mounting hole issue by how I drilled that too big compared to that one. I just made those little brackets. Now I'm going to spray just a little bit of primer. And that's just going to give me an idea of the shape here. So I can go in with a little bit of Bondo, filler, and just clean up any areas that aren't quite homogenized or sand a little bit more. I'll update you after that. Okay, now that everything is homogenized in one color, you can start seeing the shape a bit better. You can see there's a little bit of a high point right there. I don't quite like how this curves down like that. It looks too slopey, too droopy, so I'm gonna have to reshape up here. But yeah, this one's looking actually pretty good. A few little spots I'm gonna touch up. And I'm no woodworker by any means. I'm just trying to get this to look as best I can. And yeah. A little bit more sanding, a little bit of Bondo. All right, and we got everything smoothed out, and I just did a final pass with some glazing putty just to get the wood grain out of the faceplate, and just a few little low spots on the outer of the shroud. Same one here. We'll let that dry, give it a sand, and I think the tweeter plates will be finished. All right, guys, and that does it for the tweeter plates. Quite happy with how this turned out. Quite a similar look to the JBL 250 Ti. I'll put a picture of that plate there. Yeah, it's not 100% perfect, but I'm not going into paint yet, so I'm gonna have to sand down these cabinets completely and then hit it with filler primer before we get into the final paint stage. So any little imperfections I'll correct at that point. But they're looking quite good, other than the fact that I cut this hole too big and had to make these little mounting brackets. But you'll never see that once the tweeter's on. All right, so thanks for tuning in and watching episode 2 of the JBL 250 Ti build. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the next one.